The NFL draft is rapidly approaching and speculation over what the Eagles will do at pick 25 is snowballing. But the one position that for some reason just won't go away during mock drafts across the country is cornerback. For months, analysts have mocked corners to the Eagles in the first round, leaving everyone in the local media and more importantly the fans tearing their hair out. But does it really hold any weight? And could it actually make sense for the Eagles to take a corner in the first round? My name is Liam Jenkins and this is another episode of Eagles Mythbusters. Before we get started though guys, if you enjoy this kind of content, make sure you're hitting that subscribe button, leaving a like down below and let us know in the comments what you want the Eagles to do at pick 25. Does this video change your mind on the cornerback situation? We want to hear your voice in what is becoming the most passionate Eagles community on YouTube. Let's start off by looking at the bigger picture. On the screen right now you can see the 6 main protagonists in this situation and their current contract outlook. And with longevity in mind, something that's craved around the league and doesn't often come without huge paydays, the Eagles could potentially lose both starters after next season, or at the very least it's looking like Ronald Darby will be moving on to secure the bag. In the year after that, the Eagles would almost be forced to extend one of the 2 next of kin due to them entering their own contract years. If we take a best case scenario of an affordable Jalen Mills extension, who then lines up with either Sidney Jones, Cravon LeBlanc or Rasul Douglas, we'll get to Avonte Maddox later, the need for not only depth but longer term options suddenly becomes immediate. Free agency plug and plays are all well and good, but the Eagles right now have a luxury of being deep at the position. So using that as a breeding ground instead of relying on free agents seems like the best option. It's easy to say the Eagles are loaded at cornerback and have 6 guys who are locked to make the roster, but let's be brutally honest here. After 2020, that whole situation becomes murky because what do the team have in Sidney Jones? I don't think we still really know. What about Ronald Darby? Will he stay? Can the team afford to keep Jalen Mills? Will they decide to move on and get someone slightly more impactful when it comes to coverage? I genuinely don't know. There's a lot of interesting questions there, because if you lose Mills or Darby, or in fact both of them, and we take Sidney Jones out of this discussion, that leaves Rasul Douglas, who it doesn't matter what he does on the field, he can't seem to get over in Philadelphia. The Eagles ended up bringing in Dexter McDougal off the street to play in the slot when the Eagles had no other option before realizing it was a train wreck and they had to turn to their former draft pick. So if it takes that much to get Douglas on the field, why would they bring him in when they could actually benefit from his services as a starter? If there was ever going to be a first round in which the Eagles select a cornerback, it kind of makes sense for it to be this one, given that all the last drafts, all the corners mentioned here haven't been acquired by giving up quite a lot. Even Ronald Darby in that Buffalo trade. Jalen Mills was a 7th round pick. Sidney Jones slipped to the 2nd with injury concerns. This is the one time the Eagles could hit a home run at cornerback and get a franchise cornerstone talent to build around, because it's the only real position outside of that defensive main fold, outside of safety with Malcolm Jenkins, defensive tackle with Fletcher Cox, linebacker with Nigel Bradham, where they don't have a talent to build around. On to point number 2, and that is that depth is deceiving. If the Eagles move Avonte Maddox to safety, which makes perfect sense for him to learn behind Andrew Sendejo and Rodney McLeod, look at the way the Eagles moved Jalen Watkins to safety when there was a similarly crowded cornerback room. It worked wonders. He then landed a big time contract elsewhere. I think the Eagles value Maddox more than that. Unlin has got a great history with developing those defensive backs, but that leaves then 5 on the roster. Darby's missed 15 games in 2 years. Mills suffered a season-ending injury. If Rasul Douglas, who is the most likely cornerback to be traded here, does find himself out of Philadelphia and a move that pushes the Eagles maybe up or down a draft board, an immediate need for depth arises, and I think the team can find that in the first round. On to point number 3, and that is the power that the Eagles now hold at 25. Free agency has been absolutely incredible for Howie Roseman, and this shouldn't come as a surprise. But if we look back at the needs at the start of the year, where we knew that the team were going to lose Timmy Jernigan, we knew they were going to lose Jay Ajayi, it was defensive tackle, it was running back, it was wide receiver. Say hello to Malik Jackson, to Jordan Howard, and to Deshaun Jackson. Without even realizing, the Eagles have pretty much patched up all of their main starting holes. Even safety, they've brought in Andrew Sendejo, who before his groin injury in 2018 was coming off a career year with the Minnesota Vikings. So it's not like they're sat at 25 knowing there is one player they're pigeonholed into or a position they are pigeonholed into. There are 2 spots where you can get a starting impact player day 1 who won't be stuck behind in rotation at this point, and I genuinely believe it's It's either linebacker with a talent like Devin Bush or a name like Byron Murphy or DeAndre Baker, who could maybe, just maybe, slide into the laps of the Eagles at pick 25. And even if they do get stuck in behind rotation for 1 year at most, the Eagles value special teams presence, and Rasul Douglas was a key asset during his first year with the team. And if the Eagles can begin developing that tackling attribute early, something that is so pivotal in this 4-3 defense, then why wouldn't they let that marinate under the watchful eyes of Dave Phipp? Point number 4, I want to cast your minds back to 2002. The Eagles had one of the best secondaries in the league, and they still went into that year's NFL draft and took back-to-back corners. They ended up taking Leto Shepherd and Sheldon Brown, despite already having Troy Vincent and Bobby Taylor on the roster. Howie Roseman has continued to prove throughout his tenure with the Eagles that he is one of the most forward-thinking general managers in the NFL. Whether that comes to the compensatory pick formula and his continued success in getting the most out of it, or perhaps his ability to rework contracts on the roster, to add dummy years onto existing deals to make sure he gets the most out of them, to move money around to ensure that he can pay the players who deserve those paychecks. Either way, it would not be surprising to see Howie Roseman go into this year's NFL draft and realizing while there may not be a need today, the needs of tomorrow speak volumes. And although the Eagles are a win now franchise, Eagles Nation, they're already winning. They're Super Bowl 52 champions. They've been to the playoffs 2 years in a row with a backup quarterback and a slew of backups all over the roster. They scraped by into Chicago without their key starters, without any starter at cornerback for that matter. And if they can do that, then what will they do in 2 to 3 years when that defense is that much further along in development, when they've got a key starter drafted in round 1, and then all of a sudden, if you fast forward 2 years time and you've got a first round talent corner alongside an all-pro in Fletcher Cox, potentially still an all-pro in Malcolm Jenkins, an all-pro in Nigel Bradham, what more could you want? This defense will be among the most sustainable in the league, and that is how you turn winning now into winning tomorrow, the year after, and the year after. It is sustaining success, it is a culture thing, and that is what the Eagles want to do. Point number 5 is a bit of a complex one, so I need you to stick with me here, but I went back and looked at the history of Joe Douglas drafting cornerbacks, not just Howie Roseman. Of course, Douglas played a major hand in the recent history of the Baltimore Ravens, and during his tenure with the team, there was a total of 10 defensive backs drafted and an average round of 3.6. Before Douglas left for Philadelphia, the last corner drafted in the first round was Jimmy Smith back in 2011, who had done nothing but flash talent before having his progress thwarted with injuries and setbacks. The only other first round pick in that list was safety Matt Elam, a man that had battled substance abuse to being benched in the heart of 2014. He struggled to make tackles, he was a pain on deep routes, he wasn't exactly the most reliable safety. So the Ravens haven't really hit well when it comes to first round talents with Joe Douglas around. And if we look at the recent history of the Eagles, where Sidney Jones has struggled to stay healthy, where Ronald Darby has missed 15 games in 2 years, I think you can say the same. Is this finally the time that the Eagles stop trying to lowball and go, do you know what? Let's just go all in on a cornerback. Let's get a first round guy. And hey, the potential rewards is you've got a round 1 corner with a round 2 corner in Sidney Jones, and then a potential free agent or a round 3 guy with someone like Rasul Douglas as well. To me, that ceiling is just too high. I think the secondary has been the one thing holding this Eagles team back, because they can't generate enough tightness and rigidity at times for the pass rush to go and do its job, especially when they were so light on interior pass rushing depth last year. So why not shore it up? Why not start the cornerback conveyor belt? And hey, if someone does get traded prior to the draft, it only expedites that process. I don't think there are 6 locks on this roster, and if you look after 2020, there are certainly less than 3, and that is why the Philadelphia Eagles, in my opinion, are far more likely to draft a cornerback than you think. I'm not saying they will, I'm not saying I'm standing it, I'm still sold on drafting a linebacker, but I can certainly understand the reasoning why and wouldn't be too turned away by the pick. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think the Birds should be looking to draft a corner in round 1? Has this video changed your opinion? Let me know down in the comments. From myself, Liam Jenkins, you can follow me at LiamJenkins21 or Philly Sports Network at Philadelphia SN. Get your daily fix of Philly sports content at phillysportsnetwork.com, and I'll see you next time for what will be another episode of Eagles Mythbusters. Thank you so much for all of your continued support.